Hi friends, it's Deanna Williston with Our Blooming Catholic Life, and I'm here I'm here with you today to go over the Catechism of the Council of Trent. And you're like, what? You've reviewed this before. Well, I unboxed it when I first got it, and we've used it in our study of the Our Father a couple of times, but I wanted to look at it with fresh eyes. So let's just begin again. So up here you can see it's called the Roman Catechism. It's also called the Catechism of the Council of Trent. It's by Tan Books, which is ironic because there's another translation of this out, and that's by Baronius Press. And its cover is kind of a dark reddish brown, but the black one is the tan edition. It's also the Catechism of St. Pius V. Now you're like, wait, but I have this catechism, or I have this catechism. I think these are the same thing. I think these are actually the same book, just in different forms, which seems impossible if you look at it by size, but they are written out differently, small. I think these are really the same one. There's also one now with a blue cover that has like one line changed. I think that was silly to reprint such a chunky monkey for that. These are the ones that were written in, let's see here. Have a date here. Sorry. This is from 1995 is when this little guy was printed. And that's what most people have to carry around the Bible studies. What does this one say? This one says the Latin text was 1994 and 1997. This particular edition, I think, is from 2000 because it includes a glossary and an index. And so there's a newer one than this yet. So, wait, and then there's this. Well, let's get to that in a second. Okay, so first we had written documents like the Didache, right? Which was a written down catechism that priests could use to teach from. Remember in the beginning, so many people were illiterate and books weren't a thing yet. They were written as scrolls, and the average person could not afford a scroll or even read it. So what was the point? So they wrote out things over periods of time. The Didache is the most famous, but again, everybody would kind of write out their local guides. You know, a bishop might write out what he would want his priest, the key points he would want his priest to touch on. And so a number of those came about, and in some areas may have had errors, which might have been one of the things that led to the Protestant Reformation, mostly misunderstanding and bad teaching. And so they had a big council, and where did they have it? In Trent. And it had issues because, you know, there was a time of war and people wouldn't show up and there were big gaps in it. It was probably like the longest council ever, but they tried to address a lot of issues that the Protestants had, and they tried to be very clear with what it was, and just really define and clarify the Catholic teachings. Let's see here. So, well, that doesn't help. It's a woodcut showing the chair of Peter. That doesn't help you at all. It was issued by the order of Pope Pius V. Again, this is the tan issue. This was translated into English with notes by two Dominicans, Father A. McHugh and, I'm assuming their father, and Father Charles Callion. They might be brothers. It just says OP, and then they're both STMs and LITTD. I don't know what all those means, but OP should be Order of Preachers, Dominicans. There's a nihil obstat, an imprimi protest, a nihil obstat, an imprimatur. This was copyrighted, this particular edition, in 1976, and the copyright by Tan Books was 1982. Obviously, this particular one was printed in 2017. Obviously, this book is older than that. Let's kind of look at the translator's introduction, just super quick here. Wow, that's a lot of table of contents. Okay, it has been commonly asserted by non-Catholic writers that prior to the religious rebellion of the 16th century, catechisms and catechal instruction, in fact, all religious education of the people had long been neglected, and that to Luther and the Reformers was due the revival of the practice of the ancient church. From the days of the apostles and during the first centuries, very careful attention was given to Christian doctrine. But in the Middle Ages, we are told the zealous practices of early times were relaxed, instruction was given up, and ignorance of things of faith prevailed generally among the common people. We're going to have to look at that a little bit more. It does reference the Didache. So where is that? Oh, let's look here. Catechesis during the early centuries. That the requirements for admission into the primitive church were exacting and thorough, and that the catechetics, or simple instructions in the fundamental teachings of Christianity, were diligently imparted in those early times, are facts too well known and universally admitted to require any special proof here. It is clear from the writings of the Fathers, from the ancient liturgies, and from the decrees of the first councils that the catechumens before their baptism were obliged to learn by heart the Our Father and the Apostles' Creed, and had to be instructed in the meaning of these formulas. And that is actually from the Didache, which I may be mispronouncing. Forgive me. In addition, special instructions were also given them regarding the commandments and those sacraments that they are about to receive, namely baptism, confirmation, and the Holy Eucharist. It was to assist the labor of catechists that the two famous books of instruction were composed in the 4th century, the Catechetical Oration of St. Gregory of Nyssa and St. Augustine's De Catechizandis Rudibus. And that instruction was regularly given to all the faithful on Sundays during the Eucharistic celebration or Mass, we are assured by early authorities. So it's going to talk about the catechesis. Was there a crisis in it? It's all addressed in this introduction. And after they wrote this, this was originally done up. You were expected in your local country at some point to make them. I don't know what I'm saying. I filmed this like 4 times already. I say things a little differently. So this was really written for priests. This was like their textbook, their study book, the thing that they could go back to and read. That's the same as this. It's more of a handbook for priests and bishops. Well, why are the laity expected to read it? We are not. We totally can, but we don't need to. What we have instead, this one came down to us, at least here in America, as the Baltimore Catechism. That was our local adaptation, but there are different ones around the world. What about this guy? You're like, oh, well, this must be the local adaptation because it's smaller. No! This is the local adaptation of this guy. So if you're having difficulties reading this one, folks, you could go read this. This is more accessible. I'm not a super fan of this. This is like a study book. To me, this is a study book for this. It's not really a simpler form. It's more like a study guide. It's almost a workbook. Okay, there's not spaces to write, but there are questions for discussion stuff. This, to me, is a study guide for this. The Baltimore Catechism was a way to quickly memorize facts from here. But this is actually written more conversationally. So why the question and answer format? And like the UCAT, which I have laying around here somewhere too, the Youth Catechism, is again written in question and answer form. Why? Because it is mainly written for you to memorize. And that is the way you memorize things the best, is the little question and answer form. And in fact, small children, if you follow the classical model of education, are exceptionally, okay, you know this, everybody knows this. Little kids are really good at memorizing things. And so by having them memorize that when they were super young, worked out wonderfully, because then you could have discussions when they were teenagers and they had a solid foundation of things from which to draw. We don't really do that anymore. When I say we, a lot of people don't do that anymore. A lot of homeschoolers and other people have turned to the Baltimore Catechism as a solid foundation, again, for kids. Instead of the catechetical programs that follow constructivism, which is the current educational model, which believes that kids construct their own reality through experience. You can tell I prefer the Baltimore Catechism. Why? Because we're giving them a solid foundation. Sometimes your experiences can be bad or wacky, and so building on a weak foundation is never a good idea. Everyone knows that. So kids are going to have experiences, right? They're always going to have them. We don't need to be doing that. We need to be teaching them solid things. And you could actually incorporate both. You could have them memorize the questions in the Baltimore Catechism and then have an activity that goes with it. There's nothing wrong with that. Have them act it out. Ooh, that'd be fun, you know? Anyway. So what is in the Catechism of the Council of Trent? There is an introduction. I was telling you the translator's introduction. Then there's a sermon program, an introduction of need of religious instruction, the ends of religious instruction, the means of religious instructions, and the division and use of this catechism. So this book even comes with directions. First part is the creed. It's going to talk to you about the faith and the creed, and it's going to go line by line through the creed, which cracks me up because now you can go and buy a modern confirmation manual that goes through these. What? Why wouldn't you just buy each kid a Catechism of the Council of Trent to study from? I would. Even if they don't bring the books back to class, you could have ones they use in class and one they have at home. Then they would always have this at home. Beautiful, wonderful. This was never declared invalid. They wrote this one up because they thought they were modern times. And they wanted to speak to situations. It's supposed to be the same basic material, but just with comments in it that would guide you through today's life. I don't think today's life is all that different than yesterday's life. Everybody loves to say that every generation likes to think they're special, don't they? So it goes through the creed, then it goes through the sacraments in general, and then it goes through the sacraments one by one. And then it goes into the Decalogue, the Ten Commandments, and then it goes into the Lord's Prayer, and then it has a section called the Seal of the Lord's Prayer. Okay, and then there are appendixes, definition of the Immaculate Conception, definition of the infallibility of the Roman Pontiff, and that's actually from the Vatican Council, Session 4, so these are updated things there. The inseparability of the contract of the sacrament in a Christian marriage from the encyclical of Pope Leo XIII. Appendix 4 is dispensations for frequent and daily communion from the decree of Pope Pius X in 1905. So, I don't know, folks. I feel like this is pretty readable. What do you want to read? What would you like me to read? Why the sacraments were instituted? Okay, I'm on page 154. Of all the means employed to teach the proper use of the sacraments, there is none more effectual than a careful exposition of the reasons of their institution. Many such reasons are commonly assigned. The first of these reasons is the feebleness of the human mind. We are so constituted by nature that no one can aspire to mental and intellectual knowledge unless through the medium of sensible objects. In order, therefore, that we might more easily understand what is accomplished by the hidden power of God, the same sovereign creator of the universe has most wisely, and out of his tender kindness towards us, ordained that his power should be manifested to us through the intervention of certain sensible signs. Okay, in the beginning, that was really hard to understand, that first one. He's like saying that we're dummies. But then it says that we might more easily understand what is accomplished by the hidden power of God, the same sovereign creator of the universe has most wisely, and out of his tender kindness towards us, ordained that his power should be manifested to us through the intervention of certain sensible signs. He's going to use our senses. Yay! As St. Chrysostom happily expresses it, if man were not clothed with a material body, these good things would have been presented to him naked and without any covering. But as the soul is joined to the body, it was absolutely necessary to employ sensible things in order to assist in making them understood. So God could have just made it, bam, here's the teaching. But since we're in bodies, we use our bodies to learn. So right there. Another reason is because the mind yields a reluctant assent to promises. Hence, from the beginning of the world, God was so accustomed to indicate, and usually in words, that which he had resolved to do, but sometimes when desiring to execute something, the magnitude of which might weaken a belief in its accomplishment, he added towards other signs, which sometimes appeared miraculous. When, for instance, God sent Moses to deliver the people of Israel, and Moses, distrusting the help even of God, who had commissioned him, feared that the burden imposed was heavier than he could bear, or that the people would not heed his message, the Lord confirmed his promise by a great variety of signs. Right there. So, the fact that God was going to deliver all the people from their slavery and take them to the promised land, and it was just told by this random dude who showed up, who had fled Egypt because he murdered somebody? Like, are you supposed to believe him? So God gave us signs so that we would understand it. I'm not going to keep reading there, but Every now and then if something's a little bit difficult to understand, but read the next sentence, it's explained more fully. And I like that treatment. And remember, again, this was supposed to be written for priests and bishops who were to have some training in it, obviously. Let's see here. In order that the treatment of the subjects, I flipped to page 170, of the subject may be clear, we must explain the nature and substance of baptism, premising, however, an explanation of the word itself. The word baptism, as is well known, is of Greek derivation. Did you know that? I didn't. Although used in sacred scripture to express not only that ablution, oh my goodness, friends, I was just translating or doing the subtitles for a video for our friend John Bradburn. It was a Jesuit father, Father David Barry Harold, something like that, who's talking about John Bradburn. He was talking about ablution, and I had to look up what ablution was. It means washing, but it's not a word I've ever used. And here it is right here. So although used in sacred scripture, not only that ablution, which forms the part of the sacrament, but also every species of ablution, and sometimes figuratively to express sufferings, it is employed by ecclesiastical writers to designate not every sort of bodily ablution, but that which forms part of the sacrament and is administered with the prescribed form of words. In this sense, the apostles very frequently make use of the word in accordance with the institution of Christ the Lord. I am fascinated. I'm going to come back and read this because that's just the name of the sacrament. There's several more paragraphs, and then there's the formal definition of baptism. It's just so engaging and draws you in. And I always learn something new when I open this book, and that's why I want to start reading it more and more. Just a little page for night. You can see the sections are pretty small. Like here's the institution of baptism. It's here. And then already up here, subheader. So it's just that little bit. And that's that one page. And over here, next subheader. Oh, look, there's actually a reflection in here too. Just like our, just like this guy had a little reflection in it. This one has a reflection. It says here, if then pastors explain these truths accurately, there can be no doubt that the faithful will recognize the high dignity of this sacrament and venerate it with the most profound piety, particularly when they reflect that each of them receives in baptism, by the interior operation of the Holy Ghost, the same glorious and most ample gifts which were so strikingly manifested by the miracles at the baptism of Christ the Lord. Were our eyes like those of the servants of Eliseus, open to see heavenly things, who can be supposed so senseless as not to be lost in rapturous admiration of the divine mysteries of baptism? When, therefore, the riches of the sacrament are unfolded by the faithful, by the pastor, so as to enable them to behold them, if not with the eyes of the body, yet with those of the soul, illuminated by the light of faith, may we not anticipate similar results? Okay, friends, I hope you are inspired to keep reading this. Perhaps add it to your Lenten devotions. Maybe add it into your regular daily practice. I don't know. God bless you, friends.